Answers to questions like, number one, is the state going to seek other methods of prosecution if the county jurisdiction does not prosecute? Number two, who is going to be responsible for confiscation of firearms if the state determines that to be necessary? And three, finally, is the state going to revoke FOID cards even if the charges are dropped by local prosecutors?
And this is...
Seriously, I would recommend that you look at the website. I have no idea, right? I mean, this is something that we didn't support. It's ridiculous. This is unconstitutional.
Those are just a couple of the Republican voices yesterday on the final day of fall veto session about where we're at with the state's gun and magazine ban. Welcome in, Bishop on Air. Happy Friday. Like, subscribe, follow along anywhere on all the social medias. Just search Bishop on Air. Yesterday was the final day of fall veto session, and we'll obviously touch on a lot of what happened yesterday, including a discussion about shell bills. Because we see this happen time and again, happened with the gun and magazine ban. It started out as a bill about insurance, and then it was gutted and replaced in lame duck session and ultimately passed within just a matter of hours, and kaboom. You've got a gun ban with a registry that's opened October 1st and a January 1st deadline to register, or you face criminal penalties. This is obviously something that is of major concern for thousands of people out there across the state of Illinois, if not the millions, 2.4 million firearm owners ID card holders that are registered with the state as firearms owners. But as we've seen, after 5 weeks into the gun ban registry, it's only about 2,900 people have registered. That's 0.12% of total FOID card holders. Now, I know not everybody has a FOID card, has a weapon, but interesting to kind of see some of those stats and the comparisons. But as we get ready to hear some of what was talked about yesterday with the last day of fall veto session at the Illinois State House, we've definitely got to review the latest in the courts. And let's go ahead and take a look at the filing from Thomas Magg in the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. Because remember, this happened last Friday, where the Seventh Circuit, they went ahead and said, we vacate the lower court's ruling, which had a preliminary injunction, and then they said the state has a likelihood of succeeding on the merits of defending the state's gun and magazine ban. Well, yesterday we told you that attorney Thomas Magg, who represents Jeremy Langley and others in the Southern District case, he filed for en banc review from the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. So we knew that filing was made, but we hadn't had a chance to look at it because it wasn't made public. Well, it was made public. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is, of course, a request from Magg representing these individuals to ultimately have the full court look at this. So remember, the Southern District had several cases. Thomas Magg representing the Langley case, he was actually the first one to file in state court, but it was transferred to federal court. And then you had other cases filed in federal court, like the State Rifle Association, Federal Firearms Licensees, and others. They had their cases all consolidated in the Southern District with Stephen McGlynn, judge. McGlynn, he decided that there should be a preliminary injunction against the law from being enforced. So that was issued late April, only lasted 6 days before you had the case appealed by the states to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. While that was going on in the Southern District, you had the Northern District cases, where there was Naperville and Chicago individuals suing those localities, but also suing the state for the gun and magazine ban. Several cases, Northern District judges said the state has a likelihood of succeeding on the merits. So in those district cases that were consolidated, they went to the appeals court. The appeals court got both the Southern District and the Northern District, combined all of these cases, heard that case late June with 3 judges, only a 3-judge panel. And then they had the case for about 4 months. This is after the U.S. Supreme Court had already been asked by the Naperville plaintiffs, Law Weapons, to review the case expeditiously. But since the Seventh Circuit said, we're doing this as quick as we can and rocket docket and all of that over the summer, the Seventh Circuit maintained control of that after the Supreme Court said, go ahead, Seventh Circuit, do what you got to do. So they heard the case, and then 4 months later, you have a ruling come out that vacated the lower court's ruling and said that the state has a likelihood of succeeding on the merits. So what about these merits? The merits really haven't been determined yet. Now, you've got several options down in the Southern District where Magg himself has a case about vagueness, and that's being debated by Judge McGlynn. He has yet to issue a ruling on that. They've already heard oral arguments on that. But then you have the Federal Firearms Licensees of Illinois, who've also amended their initial complaint in the Southern District to say that the registry needs to be blocked while the court case plays out. And while they were getting ready to file their preliminary motion for an injunction in that case in the Southern District, that's when the Seventh Circuit dropped their appeal last week, or dropped their ruling on the appeal last week. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So, options in the Seventh Circuit. Of course, you've got Illinois State Rifle Association saying that they're going to try to take their case right to the Supreme Court. Thomas Magg, though, he's going not to the 3-judge panel, but to the full panel en banc for this particular ruling. And that's before you go to the U.S. Supreme Court. So there's a couple of different options here. And obviously, this is very much still up in the air with tons of questions. But let's go ahead and look at the filing here from Thomas Magg at the Seventh Circuit to look for an en banc appeal. And I just want to go through. Of course, he cites a bunch of cases, talks about the rule that allows for an en banc review, talks about the background of the case and how 170 different firearms are made illegal, and you've got these plaintiffs that feel that their rights are being violated, their Second Amendment rights, 14th Amendment rights, and so on. Goes on to talk about how these are now considered what? Because it's got a threaded barrel, it's a assault weapon. And looking at some of these examples, even rifles and shotguns that have a thumbstock hole. So you've got questions about that. Is that really a quote assault weapon? The petition for a panel hearing talks about the rule. Petition for a panel rehearing must state with particularity each point of law or fact that the petitioner believes the court has overlooked or misapprehended, and must argue in support of the petition. Goes on to talk about, quite simply, the panel misapprehended the word arms and what the term is used for in the Second Amendment, and in the process excluded those common firearms most useful for self-defense, which at the same time of being they're common today. And they're literally, the technology is the same as those of the descendants of the firearms that are being, quote, banned. Or being defined as, quote, assault weapons. So it goes on to talk about the Second Amendment, elevates above all other interests the right of law-abiding responsible citizens to use arms in defense of heart and home. That's according to Heller. Goes on to say that the Supreme Court clearly holds the Second Amendment protects guns commonly owned by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. At the same time, the Second Amendment confers an individual right to keep and bear arms that have some responsible relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia. A weapon may not be banned unless it is dangerous and unusual. And I think that's important. It's not dangerous or unusual. It's dangerous and unusual. If Heller tells us anything, it's that firearms cannot be categorically prohibited just because they are dangerous. So it goes on to cite Bruin as well, where the Supreme Court held when the Second Amendment's plain text covers an individual's conduct, the Constitution presumptively protects that conduct. The government must then justify its regulation by demonstrating that it is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearms regulations. Second Amendment states in parts, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The amendment presents several conditions in that plain language. Goes on to lay those out. But I want to get to something here on page 12 that I picked up briefly, and this is 110 pages plus. It goes on to say that the crux of the discussions here of the panel opinion, the 3-judge panel, was that we find substantial support for the proposition that arms protected by the Second Amendment do not include weapons that may be reserved for military use. This, of course, is another way of saying that common, ordinary, but modern firearms can be banned because they didn't exist in 1791. Fortunately, the Supreme Court's already told us twice, contrary to Friedman, that this is not the law. It goes on to say, in fact, Heller in itself rejected and as bordering on the frivolous, the argument that only arms that exist in the 18th century are protected by the Second Amendment. But this frivolous argument is the conclusion of the panel. So that's why he says it needs to be brought up on the en banc panel. There's questions as to how these the entire panel could rule. But listen, I mean, there's questions been about this whole thing since January 10th when it was enacted. How is it going to be enforced? You've got sheriffs that have said they're not going to enforce this. You've got state's attorneys that said this is unconstitutional. They're not going to enforce this. Across the state, like 90 plus, we've got 102 counties in Illinois. 90 plus have said they're not going to enforce this. So who is going to enforce this? State Representative Brad Halbrook yesterday on the House floor, he raised substantial questions about all of this and laid out his questions that are still remaining and how the legislature is getting ready to leave for the year. And the January 1st deadline is just around the corner. Here's State Representative Brett Halbrook.
Thank you. Representative Halbrook, for what reason do you rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A point of personal privilege, please.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this past week, the Illinois State Police held several public hearings about the Protect Illinois Communities Act, also known as the Firearm Ban and Registration Bill. As I stated in my testimony at ISP's first hearing, there are more questions than answers when it comes to the issues of enforcement. When this law was passed, we immediately heard from over 90 county sheriffs and state's attorneys that they would not enforce this law. The governor, however, has tried to make a claim that the counties have no discretion in prosecution and arrest related to the failure to register firearms and possession of legally purchased firearms before this new law. Here's the problem. The Illinois State Police has gone on record multiple times now stating that the issues of enforcement, they believe it will be up to the counties to decide what to do with the charges when the state issues a violation. Once again, this leaves more questions than answers. Folks, we are less than 2 months away from the enforcement date of this act. Right now, this means we are less than 2 months away from the state of Illinois making felons out of thousands of law-abiding citizens. The people deserve answers that this body, the governor, and the state of Illinois have yet to give them. Answers to questions like, number one, is the state going to seek other methods of prosecution if the county jurisdiction does not prosecute? Number two, who is going to be responsible for confiscation of firearms if the state determines that to be necessary? And three, finally, is the state going to revoke FOID cards even if the charges are dropped by local prosecutors? Are we going to have thousands of people with revoked FOID cards next spring for simply exercising their constitutional right to bear arms? It seems once again the legislature and the governor have failed to get on the same page and have no regard for the stakeholders' responsibility for enforcement. I fully intend to submit further questions and testimony to the Illinois State Police and JCAR on this matter. I know I'm hearing from thousands of people across the state whose response to the tyrannical government is this: we will not comply. Thank you.
Clearly, questions mounting, and
Ammons, for what reason
clearly questions continue to just not be necessarily fully addressed. And one way we've seen them being addressed during these public hearings, and again, we've covered all three of them. If you look back at the channel, you can see the highlights. If you want to watch the entire hearings, you can go to the Illinois State Police website and watch the WebEx recordings. But ultimately, you heard time and again, refer to the website. Go check out the frequently asked questions. Listen, I get it. Frequently asked questions websites are great. But that's not necessarily binding law, is it? You can go through and read the rules, but the rules that state police filed for the gun ban registry really, in many instances, just restates the state law, which people have questions about. What needs to be registered? What's considered an attachment? What's the process of enforcing this? State police say go to the website, check out the frequently asked questions. That's not a legal document and can change on a whim, quite frankly. Now they say they're hoping to try to get a pathway of sorts of showing what's the latest information with the firearms regulations, or the answers that state police are providing about the firearms regulations. But is that a legal document? And again, will it hold up in court because of how it can change on a whim? So these are substantial questions that really haven't been answered. So while it's still being challenged in the courts on multiple levels, not just the Southern District, but also back at the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals and soon to be at the U.S. Supreme Court, you've got the rules in place, and that January 1st deadline to register, people will become felons overnight. So I asked the House Minority Leader, Tony McCombie, for her thoughts on how thousands of people, especially legislators, going home for the winter, for the rest of the year, they're not back until January 18th, or rather January 16th. So what about these firearms owners? How are they going to be impacted by the gun registry that's very much in full effect unless a court strikes it down or unless the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules suspends rules next month?
Apparently, are either going to destroy those or they become potentially felons January 1st.
Are they?
Well, I mean, so far, 2,900 people have registered a month in, 5 weeks in.
Yeah, there's a lot of question with that, isn't there? So I would recommend that you review the ISP website.
But if you could though, I mean, tongue in cheek aside, this is
No, seriously, I would recommend that you look at the website. I have no idea, right? I mean, this is something that we didn't support. It's ridiculous. This is unconstitutional. It's so obviously unconstitutional. This is going to be, if this does not quickly go to the Supreme Court, you are going to make law-abiding gun owners felons. But are you? Because who's going to come knocking on their doors and come take them away? I don't even know how this is going to work. And who's going to come? I just don't even know how it's going to work.
So clearly you've got the issue of, the question of constitutionality, whether or not it's going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court soon. Is that going to happen before January 1st? Are the rules going to be delayed? Clearly, we'll be tracking all of this because, we've got 7 weeks, less than 7 weeks before the gun ban registry deadline hits, and people could turn into felons overnight. We'll be tracking all of that. Be sure to follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air, all the socials, and you can find me also here each and every weekday morning from 7 to 7:40ish to about 8:10ish or so. I know I was a few minutes late today, but no sweat. I'm doing this all. You're in my home, all right? So I appreciate you guys taking the time each and every weekday morning and hanging out. And just a programming note, might be kind of hit or miss next week. Just to let you know. I'm taking off my full-time gig with the Center Square because I need to burn some vacation days before the end of the year. So I am going to be hit or miss throughout the week next week and do a lot of home projects and maybe even do some engineering here for the show as well. So just wanted to give you guys that heads up, all right? Stay tuned. We got plenty more coming up. It is Bishop on Air. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for tuning in. Hey!